Friends, hey, hello, happy Friday, and welcome to a special edition of The Mind Behind. It's Friday. I know there's lots of wrestling going on, so you know I will guarantee that we are bringing you someone great from the professional wrestling scene. And you guys can see her right in front of your own eyes. You know that I am living up to that guarantee, for lack of a better way to put it. Ella J joining me, the host, the founder of A Wrestling Gal, and again, someone I'm lucky enough to call a friend in this ruthless business of journalism, right? Good to see you, friend. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. It's fantastic here in Edmonton. The sun is out. The sky is blue. I gardened for the last couple of days, so today I sort of took the proverbial sick day on having to do anything in the backyard, which was nice. It was nice to just sit there, hang out with the pup, and do my thing. Sandy, it is good to see you. Good evening from Germany. I think you even tweeted back at us that it was like 2 a.m. where you are right now, which is absolutely insane. Thank you for the time. And Jesse, it is good to see you, friend.
Hey, Jess.
Hello. Thank you for tuning in. John, of course, as well. A Mind Behind Rules, and so does Ella J and Spencer. Well, I can certainly speak for my guest. I'm fine. And Reese, I can speak for an emote being great. I just look so satisfied. There's no real other way to put it. More than satisfied, of course, to have you on the show today. Like I said, you're not just someone doing a wrestling gal. You're someone doing great things for women's professional wrestling. You're working with the names of Mickie James and Victoria and Gaw TV and so on and so forth. But I do want to start at the beginning. It's, of course, the proverbial origin story to any superhero. How did you get into podcasting? I know you've been a fan since the CM Punk, Jeff Hardy days, but how did you get into the podcasting and, I guess, content creation side of things?
Yeah, so it started about 2 years ago this month. I had just graduated college and, I was all set to go to grad school, had gotten enrolled and everything, and was like, but then in the back of my mind, I was like, I don't really know if this is what I want to do, because I just graduated with a bachelor's in psychology. So I was going to grad school for a program called rehabilitation counseling, got accepted, enrolled, all that. And I was like, I don't know if this is really what I want to do or if I just wanted a break. So I had just planned to maybe take a semester or a year off. So I unenrolled. But then in the back of my mind, I was like, I want to do something in wrestling. Wrestling has always been a passion of mine, and it kind of had to be put on the back burner for a while since my college days, since you have to focus on your studies. And I had always been a fan of interviews and wrestling podcasters like Alicia Toot and Chris Van Fleet, is to name a few, amazing work.
Yeah,
and
some of the best in the game, right?
Yeah. So then kind of just on a whim, I did some research and other podcasters and how to start your own. And then the one day it'll end up being, it's almost coming up on 2 years. It'll be 2 years in July since my first episode. And then I kind of just on a whim, I'm like, I'm going to order some equipment and then just play around with it and maybe do my own thing and talk about wrestling, whether that be reviews or opinions or yada, yada. I didn't intend to do interviews exclusively. It was originally going to be creative and prediction videos, fun stuff. But then I realized I really like the interviewing aspect of it. So I kind of just stick with the interviews now and throw in the occasional fun episodes. So I got my equipment and then taught myself how to do audio and all of that. And I was like, I can't, wrestling has been a passion of mine. I feel like if I went to grad school, it would have to be put on a back burner. And I just can't do that. I love talking wrestling, and it's been something I was so closeted about. Even when I was talking with Jess on her show last month, it's something that I was always kind of ashamed to talk about besides.
Dude, right?
Yeah. Outside of the wrestling community on Twitter that I had built, I felt like I had separate lives. People didn't even know this. I was telling
And I quite literally, Ella, I went to my first wrestling show alone because I didn't want to ask anybody to come with me, lest it's you watch wrestling. I feel you on that one. 110%.
Or I dragged my brother there. Yeah. Other times I did find some friends from high school and college that I found out liked wrestling, but most of the time I would just drag my brother or my parents there, and I would pay for their ticket too. So I'd have to pay for 2 tickets each time, which was fine because I got to see my favorite people. And then, I kind of just started my podcast from there with my best friend, Samira. I was like, Samira, I need something I know evolution is a big thing. I was like, I want to talk about my Evolution 2 dream matches. And then, so that's the second half. And I was like, I want to kind of try out this interviewing thing too. So my other friend, Samira, who is a wrestling content creator and YouTuber on YouTube at It's Samira on YouTube and at the It's Samira on Twitter and Instagram. So luckily, she had been doing interviews and stuff for years too. So I was really inspired by her too. And I was like, I
Yeah.
just wanted to give a voice because female voices weren't really as prominent, or there really wasn't a lot of us 2 years ago even, and we've grown since. But I have this love for wrestling, and I was like, I want to do something. It started out as kind of a hobby during that time I took off from school, and now it's
Yeah.
kind of turned into something that I actually want to
Snowballed.
do. Yeah, actually, besides my shoot job, maybe you can make this a career. We'll see.
Right. Now, I do want to say a couple of things before we jump back into the questioning. Tom, good to see you. Couldn't miss it. And thank
Hey,
you for rating us
Tom.
with a few friends. Nice to see you, including, of course, Ed. Quite literally, man, I don't think you've missed a stream since you started following us, which
Hey,
is,
Ed.
again, nuts. Thank you guys for the support. Where was I? Throwback. What's good? This is good. I'm joined by another one of pro wrestling's finest, Ella J. We are chatting women's wrestling, all wrestling, and of course, a wrestling gal. Who would have thought we'd do that on Love Wrestling? Hey,
I
odd
had no
thing,
idea.
hey?
What's wrestling?
Who would have thunk? Wrestling, I believe it's
Yeah.
commonly referred to now.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned in a previous interview I listened to, a wrestling gal wasn't the original name. You didn't say what it was. What was it supposed to be?
Oh my god, yeah, you did your research, So originally, I had created the account and everything. Originally it was going to be called Empower Wrestling, and like I had made a graphic, like a simple graphic, because I know nothing. But obviously I've learned over time like to be better at graphics, and luckily there's programs like Canva and like logo makers and like Vistaprint, yada yada.
Right.
So originally I had saved the name like Empower Wrestling Podcast because I wanted it to be like about girl power and female empowerment and like the female perspective, like I say. But then I was like, I don't know. I was like, I wanted to, like, and then I was like, then I was making sure names weren't taken and all that. I was like, well, like I'm a girl power, a wrestling girl, a wrestling gal. I was like, we talk about like gal pals and like all of that. So I ended up changing it for some reason. So to be more like broad, because I don't want it, because everybody's story is different. Like not all episodes. Some episodes are going to be fun. Some episodes are going to be deep. I feel like obviously we're all about empowering, but I feel like some episodes there might be like deeper stuff. So I don't want to like pigeonhole myself into, because there's always positive
like
and
almost
negatives.
you almost have to like almost force the conversation sometimes if that was to be the
Sometimes
brand,
like
right?
positive. Yeah, like we're all about positivity too, but sometimes some stories and stuff are negative and have like really, especially with some topics in wrestling. So I was like, I'm gonna keep it more broad and go with a wrestling gal. So yeah, that was the name I decided on, to be sure it wasn't taken and everything. Like I did all my research. So yeah, it was originally gonna be called Empower Wrestling. But then I was like, not everything in wrestling is empowering or positive. So I kind of made it more broad. Yeah.
Exactly. Holden Albright hopping in. I'm a wrestling fan. I'm a Holden Albright guy. If you guys are looking to check out some great pro wrestling in the Ontario scene, there is a great start for you. Reese Pop and me, Big Pop for the Canva mention.
Dude, Canva is a lifesaver. Like I make all my merch and stuff on Canva. I really love Canva. Sometimes like it became an addiction at one point, honestly.
Like as silly as this is going to sound, Ella, is there anything that you don't do, whether it's your graphics, your editing, any of that sort of stuff? Like it's time consuming. So I sort of ask is just like a general scope of like almost putting you over. Look at how much shit you do.
The only thing I guess I really don't do is, well, I mean, for merch stuff, like I send my friend Samira stuff and like send it to her so her and her friend who's a photographer do modeling for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they do the shoots and all of that. I mean, I send it to them. That's really the only thing I guess I don't do is my own shoots, because I send it to them. I don't like model it myself really. So I guess that's the only thing I don't do.
What did you find about the hardest part about starting up? Like,
I think honestly, like the first episode took me 8 hours, and that's just the second half of the episode where I'm talking about the Evolution 2 dream matches. My thing with Samira, just because we were good friends, took like 2 hours for like 10 minutes. And then the actual recording though took like 8 hours because I was such a perfectionist. I'm like, I hated the sound of my voice. Now I'm used to it. And then I was so nitpicky about like cutting out ums and uhs and likes and like awkward pauses. And so that was my first episode that like wasn't scripted. So I hated how I said stuff. So I think starting out was getting over like my self-consciousness and like getting used to how to properly edit audio and all of that. So like my first episode, literally like the last 20 minutes took 8 hours to record and edit because I was so self-conscious and nitpicky and such a perfectionist. So I think starting out was definitely learning the ropes and learning to not be as self-critical, like 'cause everything can't be perfect,
Yeah, it's like a cliche way to put it, but like accepting the flaws in it, right? Because like
Yeah.
even for me, I'm a much worse editor than you, I will admit, but like even I notice when I cut out those like ums or ahs, or for me it's 110% that I say 5,000 times in every podcast. It sounds odd. You need those little like intricacies, I guess, to make it sound natural, right? Sandy, want to shout you out? Sorry you're tired. I appreciate it, man. It is 1 a.m. You corrected me earlier, but that is still a very late time in the day to be tuning in. And it is especially appreciated as it is for everybody. Ella is a superwoman. I couldn't agree with you more.
That's one of my best friends, Jocelyn. She's from Edmonton too, actually. She's amazing.
Rad.
Yeah.
That is very, very cool.
Yeah.
Fellow Edmontonian. Nice to see you, Jocelyn. Throwback hopping in. Good to see you as well. First and foremost, thank you for the cheer. What do you guys think about wrestling promotions using Twitch for ways for major promotions to connect to viewers? Do you think this helps promotions like Impact to scout talent from other Twitch channels? Wrestling promotions like Chaotic? Ella, I'll let you take it first because I've got a couple of thoughts. I'll leave her up there for you. Don't worry.
You guys think like Twitch? I think it gives new platforms to discover new talent, especially in this pandemic where people can't go from like live show to live show for scouting and stuff. So I think definitely it's a beneficial way to not only connect to viewers, because I go on Twitch all the time, like for gaming and stuff, not so much wrestling. But I think if people like to enjoy wrestling, especially in this pandemic era, like you have to go online, whether that's through Title Match Network or like in the indie wrestling, or I'm blanking out on all the other.
I think it's IWTV that does it. Like, fight.
Yeah. So it's a way, especially in the pandemic, when you can't go to live shows to scout talent. And I mean, Twitch is a beneficial way, and you discover new things every time. I'm mainly on there for gaming and stuff, but I mean, Twitch is another great way and platform to showcase talent that you might not have seen otherwise. Why not?
Yeah, and like I think Twitch, and like you mentioned with a couple of them, like IWTV, I'm on there trying to watch as much as humanely possible. They do Fight does out of Edmonton as well. We've got Backbreaker Media who does Alberta specifically. Like again, you sort of find your almost independent wrestling sites among the zeitgeist, but I digress. When you start to take advantage of that online stuff, whether it is just like the exposure that you're talking about, throwback, or even the monetization, like throwing something up as a DVD, great, but I don't think you're finding that market as much as you would with like tape traders and stuff like that. The real market's online. Like I subscribe to Impact because in some way, shape, or form, as cheesy as it's going to sound, like if that goes and supports a performer or allows Impact to grow or whatever, which is a product I like, cool. IWTV, same thing. More wrestling on the internet, I think, especially like you said, when we're probably still a few months away from, at least in Canada, being back to full swing, I suppose. Conrad, good to see you, friend. Ellen Spenny, favorite piece of wrestling memorabilia
that I own, or like?
Well, you know what? Just in the interest of expanding on the question, that you own, and then just overall.
Overall, oh my gosh, I can't. Oh gosh. Okay. I mean, honestly, I wish this is something that I wish I owned. I think the title belts are really cool. I feel like that is a favorite staple wrestling piece of memorabilia. Like I wish I had like the WWE championship from like 2009, 2010, like the classic one.
Right.
Before this new one, before the uniting in 2014 or late. Yeah, I think it was early 2014. One I own, I mean, going back, I guess, to my girl Mickey James, like the first ever wrestling poster I got was around WrestleMania 26, and like I still have the poster from 2010 of her that I still have. Granted, the sides are a little ripped and stuff because I used to tape it up to my wall, but it's still in pretty good condition. I feel like that is just like looking back things full circle. That was when I first got into wrestling and like a fan of hers, and now to see that it's still with me all along through this time, through 11 years ago now, I think that's probably my favorite, just because it's nostalgic and it's really sentimental to me.
Absolutely. That I own, I've got a Shane McMahon Mania 32 jersey, which I quite appreciate. I don't know why, but I really want a Y2AJ jersey, or Y2AJ shirt. So I don't know if it's my favorite, but like certainly most desired, I guess. I love those like barely used, little worn, whatever pieces of of merchandise. What specifically draws you to Mickie James? Because, like, again, you've said previously that you started to get in around like the less flattering storylines, I suppose is the best way to put it. Like the Piggy James storyline, which I don't think anyone would look at as presenting her all that positively, despite how effing talented she is. Like, what was it that drew you to her initially?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking back, I think I understand it more looking back. Like, she was literally the first woman I saw in women's wrestling, and she was like the baby face at that time. And of course, when you're 11, 12 years old, you're going to cheer for the baby faces. So I think initially it was because she was like, everybody was cheering her, and I thought she was so cool. But looking back in that storyline, especially, that was when I was in middle school. So in that storyline was something I could relate with to a very large extent, with like body insecurities and like bullies and that stuff. So I think that story, granted, was it done tastefully? No.
Not
and
at
like
all.
I've told her this, but I think the overall message is that I could empathize with her and relate to her. And then like that moment at the Royal Rumble, again, it was only like 20 something days where she had the title after the Royal Rumble 2010, but it was that moment of like overcoming the bullies. And I felt like I could relate to her on that level because it was something that really hit home to me, especially back then. And this was before I understood kayfabe and all of that. But like storyline wise, I think I was really drawn to her because it was like another, oh, look, a woman is actually wrestling, you know, and she was portraying a character that, I mean, it was transcending reality. So I think it was because I could empathize with her and relate to her a lot. And she like overcame the bullies in a sense, whatever, especially with something to that magnitude with that storyline. I still cringe at it, but again, I'm grateful that I found it, because if I didn't, I don't know where I would be today, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is like, again, to be as cheesy with it as possible, like every step or misstep is sort of what made you, right? Yeah. I want to get back to that in a sec, but Throwback hopping in as well. First, again, thanks for the cheer. Thank you for the continued support. Sorry, I'm going to get to the question portion of it. How did, there we are. What match or pay-per-view has changed your life to get to this point? How did it change you as a person, a fan, and a content creator? And do you think it led you to different paths along the way? I can be quick with this one. SummerSlam 2019, when The Fiend entered, I knew I wanted to do something in wrestling for the rest of my life. That's the best answer. Survivor Series 16, too. That was my first live pay-per-view. But let's get to the important answer. Ella.
Change you as a person, as a fan. I think as a fan, this is one I feel like not a lot of people like give enough credit to, but one that stands out is definitely No Mercy 2016 with The Miz and Dolph Ziggler, because I was such a huge Ziggler fan at that point, and that was like just like such an emotional moment, and where I hadn't had a lot of moments in wrestling that really made me emotional up until that point, I don't think. Besides like Shawn Michaels retiring and Edge retiring. And then again, like WrestleMania 26, that was emotional too, because it was Shawn ended up losing. He's my favorite of all time. But No Mercy 2016 between The Miz and Dolph, I feel like that really elevated the Intercontinental Championship and really brought their feud and the IC title to like a climax and really elevated it. And it was such an emotional thing for me because everybody was convinced that Ziggler was losing, or you're convinced that something is going to happen. And for like, you're like, you know, you're not getting your hopes up, but then it's totally, wrestling is unpredictable. And he ended up taking out the victory and overcame The Miz, who against all odds, against the Spirit Squad and all of that. So that I think really made me appreciate the more emotional aspects of wrestling. That there's only been like maybe 5 moments in wrestling that have really made me emotional or go, oh my God, you know? So that one definitely stands out for me. I really can't pinpoint anything content creation wise where I'm like, I want to do this, because I was more so inspired by all the other like wrestling interviewers and podcasters out there. I was always into wrestling. So I think, but emotional wise, that was definitely one that stands out to me personally.
That is an underappreciated feud, because you're bang on. Like, it was what, 6 months, Maurice getting involved as much as she did. I don't even think we need to talk about how good The Miz was at that point. Like, that's been beaten to death in the most positive of ways. But as far as Ziggler goes, like, that guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and it's hard for me to find an argument otherwise as far as I'm concerned.
I hope so.
He's
Again, like once you're a Ziggler fan, you're just used to being let down and you don't get your hopes up anymore. You literally like think worst case scenario. So then when he actually does win or actually finally does get a singles match at WrestleMania, you're like, oh wow, this actually happened. But I mean, unless you're a Ziggler fan, I feel like you, I mean, there's certain wrestlers like Cesaro too can even relate on that because you
right.
think something great is going to happen, then it start, stop, and you don't want to get your hopes up, but you always have that hope in the back of your mind. But you're always like,
That's
you think
exactly
worst
it. They
case
always manage to
scenario.
they always manage to convince you just
Yeah,
enough that things are going to be
yeah,
different this time.
especially with those two. Yeah.
But what can you do? Ed Hoppinen, what interview is the most challenging for you in a positive way where you really had to work to get a good story or get the interview, not counting the wonderful women of GAW TV? Nicely played, Ed. You got there before I did.
I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously, like challenging, like, well, obviously Mickey, but not including her. What interview was the most challenging for you in a positive way? Where you really had to work to get a good story or get the interview? Challenging. I think so last year when Deonna Purrazzo got released, I was hesitant to reach out because I felt like she was being bombarded with interviews. But I was like, I'm just gonna say screw it and go for it. So I got her the month of May, right the month between she got released and the month before she got signed with Impact. So I wanted to do something that would stand out because she was doing so many other interviews. But I was like, I really want to talk to her because I think she has a great story. And then so I was taking information from other people who had worked with her and then tried to be different. So a lot of it we were talking about like self-worth, especially after her release. And then hearing stories from other wrestlers before her that I had on my show talk about her being really huge in independent wrestling and like not only advocating for herself, but she went out of her way to advocate for others when she was in a position where she had more experience and more like leniency or credibility with promoters or like other promotions. So she went out of her way to speak up for some talents to get opportunities and like vouched for them and stuff. So not only in wrestling supposed to be a selfish business, right? In air quotes, but Deonna really went out of her way and hearing stories about others working with her behind the scenes, something that like you wouldn't really know unless you're especially in the industry. So I really took a lot of great appreciation in preparing for that because I wanted to hear her perspective on it in advocating for others and herself as well, especially after she had just been released. And especially like you had to have been feeling like a blunder to one's self-worth, you would think. But no, she took it as an opportunity to kind of reclaim and reinvent herself and then show the world. And she ended up in Impact. And now look where she is now. She knew her worth. And then she took advantage of an opportunity she was given after she was released now in Impact. And so I think she's done a great job. I think that one is definitely one of my favorites, like challenging in a positive way. I would say Deonna Purrazzo, my first one with her.
You talk about people who have like, again, gone on to sort of take the fight response to the fight or flight. Like if you're not talking about her as like, not even just one of the top female wrestlers in the world right now, but one of the top wrestlers in the world, like her. You look at Britt Baker over in AEW. Like the hard question for you, Ella, because it's one that people, again, on the Twitter sphere, in this wrestling Twitter that you may be a part of, seem to have it every so often. Best female division in professional wrestling right now.
It's really hard to pick between NXT and Impact. It is really hard, but and even Stardom, but I would say mainstream rise, it's really hard to pick between NXT and Impact. I think I'm gonna give oh man, it's really, really hard. Oh man. Are we talking you know what? I'm gonna give the edge to NXT because it's really hard though, because both like do multiple segments for their women, not only for their main titles, but their tag team titles and even like third segments. Like we see that on NXT every week. But I think I'm gonna give the edge to NXT because they've been really consistent. But then again, so has Impact. But I think it's really hard. Oh man, it's really hard. I honestly don't think. Oh, it's
It's a
really
very
hard.
good problem to have when it's this difficult to figure out. Like, the nice thing is it's like a buffet, right? Like you're not going to get disappointed wherever you choose to go. You're getting what you want, right? Got to shout out Speedball Bailey. Thank you for the cheer. Appreciate it, friend. Enjoyed the stream today. Throwback hopping in as well. What is the unicorn interview you want to do, and who are some people you want to work with in the future when it comes to going on shows? This one today is amazing. Thanks, Throwback. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the cheer, and I just appreciate you as a human being. It's always been fun chatting with you on here or otherwise. Anybody else who wants to throw questions, comments, hopefully not concerns, but I guess this is a public platform. You can do as you please. It's just really not the right avenue to do it. I'm enjoying the conversation. Don't bring me down, man. Sorry, I shouldn't take that down. There was a question there. What is the unicorn interview that you would want to do, and who are some people that you would like to work with?
Does that mean like dream interview? I'm assuming.
Yes, that's okay. I'm assuming so too.
So obviously dream, like if we're talking in an ideal world, it would be my favorite wrestler of all time, Shawn Michaels, but I don't think that is ever going to happen. But dream all time, Shawn Michaels. And other dream ones I think are like Dakota Kai, who I really have come to like admire and love. I think she is fantastic. But right now, I mean, I have lists of people, like there's honestly so many people. Independent wise though, I would love to work with Kylan King. Has been doing amazing in AEW and that division, and then I literally have a list of people. There's so many people. Kylan King is one I want to work with. I wish I had gotten a hold of Priscilla Kelly before she got signed with WWE. She's one that I've been wanting to work with for a while. Charlie Evans is at the top of my list. She's been killing it now that she's been back home in Australia. I do miss her in Medusa Complex in the UK, but obviously now Millie McKenzie is in NXT UK. There's a lot of people, honestly, but those are definitely off the top of my head that I can think of. I have a whole like notebook of people that I want to work with, but right now, in the independent scene, definitely Kylan King, Charlie Evans, and maybe hopefully one day Gigi Dolan and Dakota Kai. Or if I ever got Shawn Michaels, just know I would be dying inside.
I was gonna say that's like I call them retirement interviews. Is like if I was forced to retire, but you get this interview. Cool. I'll call her quits. I'll give up on my hopes and dreams for this one. It's fine. What have you thought of the return of Ring of Honor's women's division so far?
Well, I love that it's like talent I'm familiar with, like Roxy, who I have established a great rapport with throughout the last, like, I guess it'll be 2 years coming up on. She's fantastic. I'm glad that Trish Adora is getting an opportunity. Laney Luck, a lot of the Texas girls, which I'm not mad at. So, again, I don't know everything, but I know Trish Adora was on there. We saw Laney Luck, Hyan, who is fantastic. Who I know,
Max the Impaler, I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, and who did Trish Adora just face? I know she.
I'm trying to remember too. Honestly, really I'm so bad once you start asking me. It's almost like deer in the headlights. You can start to rattle off facts, and as soon as you're interrupted, it's like song lyrics I've found. Like you can be singing along, and then you're like, oh shit, what's the next lyric? Whoosh, you know?
Yeah, and I know, I believe Kelly, then again, Kellyanne, I think, is still stuck in Australia, but she was supposed to be part of their tournament last year, like the women's division. She's from Australia, but they are taking a lot of the Texas talent, which I think is phenomenal. And I'm sure there's going to be amazing other implementations into this division, but I'm excited to hopefully see it grows and it's talent that maybe would not have gotten an opportunity on like a grander platform otherwise. But I love the talent that they've been bringing in so far.
We've got one from Ed in the comments as well. If you could give one piece of constructive criticism to AEW about featuring their women's talent from your point of view, what would it be?
Are we talking like Dynamite or Dark or Elevation or just all of it in general?
I would assume Dark, or I would assume not Dark or Elevation, excuse me, just on the fact that like at least they've got a lot of women's matches.
Yeah,
I wish they were shorter. I wish like the entire shows themselves were shorter on the Dark end. Like that's about it.
We get so much. We have so many short matches though. Again, there's so many matches in such a short amount of time. I wish that I love that they're featuring a lot of talent on just side tangent on Dark. I love that we're getting a lot of matches, but sometimes it feels like there's not enough substance, that it's not you truthfully can't showcase yourself in, I think, 2 to 3 minutes. I mean, sometimes you have to, but for me, I'd rather have quality matches over 2 minutes, sometimes less. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving people opportunities. I just wish it was more quality. But in terms of Dynamite, it feels like the really only consistent storyline we've had over the last year is, I mean, we had Penelope Ford with Kip Sabian, and then Best Friends and Miro and all that. She was involved in that. That was actually a consistent thing. But really, the only person who's had like a consistent basis and like character development has been Britt Baker. And again, like, the pandemic has obviously hindered Hikaru Shida from traveling back and forth, so we didn't get to see her as much. But it really feels like the only consistent player in the AEW women's division is Britt Baker. And other than her, there really has been no substance in storylines. Yes, they can have great matches, but there really hasn't been consistent storytelling up until recently.
You've got to follow up on it.
And it
Yeah.
felt like the champion, and again, Hikaru Shida couldn't travel, but it felt like the champion wasn't even there or even mentioned or relevant half the time. It was just all around Britt Baker. And so at that point, why don't you just have Britt Baker be champion at this point if everything's centering around her and she's doing fantastic? Felt like the championship didn't even matter at some point.
Yeah, and like, you have the conversation, I'm sure you have as well, is like, it's nothing against what Sheeta's done. It's just Britt Baker right now is the biggest star in wrestling, arguably, right? Like, if you're not putting championships on those people, I've never booked wrestling, and I will go to the people who have made billions of dollars most of the time before me. I just feel like when you've got, like, again, the biggest star in wrestling, maybe a title would be great. Maybe a title would be great. Hopping in as well with Throwback, and let's take one more fan question if we get one in the comments sooner rather than later, because, of course, the Blue Brand returns tonight for the go-home show for WrestleMania Backlash, which somehow is supposed to be different than the regular Backlash. If you had to fantasy book the 4 horsewomen all facing off each other from Rumble to Mania, and all 3 women's titles are a part of it, who becomes the first women's Triple Crown champion? And then, do you consider a true women's Grand Slam all WWE titles, including NXT and UK? He's voice to text, so apologies. Throwback also throws in there.
So if I were
don't ever apologize.
One of the 4 horsewomen told, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. New Jack just passed away. That's not good, and I'm sorry for lack of a better way. That sucks. Oh, shit. Does anybody know how? Sorry to just kill the vibe. We'll get back to that question soon, but obviously our condolences to New Jack. That is tough. That one's tough. Oh, man. Yeah, well, we'll be talking about that, I am certain, sooner rather than later here over on the old Love Wrestling side of things. But let's finish things on a positive, because we've got a great guest today, and despite some sad news, we've got great people doing great things in pro wrestling, and we like to celebrate those. We will celebrate, of course, New Jack later. Let's get back to the women's title scene here in WWE. 3 women's championships in the Federation, as the insiders like to call it sometimes, so I'm going to use it here. How do you book it from the Rumble to Mania, and who becomes the first women's triple champion?
Selfishly, no, I'm not going to be selfish in this.
No, be selfish. This is your guest spot. Be as selfish as you want.
Selfishly, I would love for Charlotte Flair to, but I think a good spin on it would honestly be Bayley, because I think she is the most, and again, she has had an incredible run, but I think, like, in people's minds, and maybe I'm perceiving things wrong, is I think Bayley is the most, like, underrated 4 horsewoman. And, like, just going based off of, like, the 50 greatest women, she's ranked number 10, which is the lowest out of any of them. So I think Bayley is capable of so much, and I think that would really give her a chance to, like, up her name and like cred even more and like rise above the ranks, because even in the NXT days she was obviously the last one to get called up. So I think it would be a really cool twist to have her be the one to kind of like be the ultimate champion out of all of them, especially knowing her past. And she really didn't get that breakout until, well, coming up on 2 years now, when she turned heel and had that great run. So I think giving that to somebody like Bailey would be a really cool like level up and elevate her name and her legacy.
Almost like
more.
eclipse the older siblings, for lack of a better way to put it. That's the comparison that I would make, is like, because like I've got 3 younger brothers, and I can tell you, like, if the youngest one felt shunned, that'd be how he'd be going about it, is like, well, F you, I'm going to prove everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you there at all. And like, it's pretty nice. I was having the conversation actually last night on like power rank the 4 horsewomen almost. And it's like 1A, 1B, and 1C. You can't really power rank them, right? It's kind of a great problem to have. I lost my spot in my question. Oh, there we go. Because it is the one that I always like to ask. That's why I highlighted it. The last one I want to close out with, as far as my questions go, when did you start to realize you were like having an impact on women's professional wrestling? Because for me, like, you're someone I'll always go to as not only a good interviewer, but like someone whose opinion I trust. If you're saying something on Twitter, I will take it as almost a gospel, for lack of a better way to put it. So when did you start to realize you were impacting the women's professional wrestling scene?
I honestly still don't even think that I am. And that's the God honest truth. But I think the point where I realized that maybe I could be getting more opportunities, if that makes sense, would be when Mickey asked me to join Team Gaw this past November. And so that's where I felt like, oh, I'm doing actually kind of matters, or people are somewhat kind of noticing whatever. I still think that there's other people out there who have had more experience and have a way bigger impact. I honestly don't think that I do, but to be acknowledged, to feel like what I'm doing kind of matters. I think definitely last November when Mickey asked me to be part of Team Gaw, and then now I'm getting more opportunities, and there's an exciting one coming up that just needs to be finalized that I'm super excited about. Can't really speak on it yet because I don't want to, spoil it before it actually comes into full fruition. But
wait until the contracts are signed, they say, right?
I mean, essentially, yes. But I think that was really like that was really like a life altering moment, I think, or maybe not life altering, but like career altering, where I made the turning point where I was like, whoa, like I like my work kind of, people actually kind of care about it, or like think of me. I still don't think that I have the biggest impact or anything, because there's people with more experience and have way more opportunities and great voices and great opinions and stuff. But I think that was a big pivoting point and turning point, I think, where I was like, oh, maybe I don't suck.
I think that's the way everybody tends to put it, right? Like, it's almost, for me, I call it, like, not call it, but it is the imposter syndrome for me, is like, oh, I don't suck, rather than like, I'm making an impact, but I'll be the one to put you over. You're making a huge impact in women's professional wrestling. You're someone I'm lucky to call a friend, and it's been an absolute blast having you on the show today. We've got one more positive vibe question. Who's the GOAT in women's wrestling, and why is it Billie Kay? Plug. Fantastic. I have to throw that one out there. Take a minute, throw some appreciation to someone you love in professional wrestling, Ella, whether it's Mickey James or otherwise.
Yeah. So, I mean, she's always like, it's crazy that like the person I grew up and truthfully is the GOAT in my mind. Like, I cannot call a friend. It's still the strangest thing. But no, I feel I am so biased to her, but also like she has accomplished so much, like especially in her first run being so iconic, and even in her second run, like even when she wasn't being utilized, she was consistently, and I don't even think a lot of people even know this, but she was consistently bringing about storylines to people, and always like patiently waiting backstage and stepping up when they needed people, like for Royal Rumble appearances and stuff. And she was always willing to put other people over, whether that be selling or pitching storylines for other people or the ones that involved herself. She fought for her spot consistently. And I feel like she really is a legend, and she is all about like women's wrestling and not only getting herself over, but other people. And I feel like, again, this is supposed to be a selfish business. And again, I don't know everybody else's story, but I feel like she really fought for herself and women's wrestling as a whole. And it's unfortunate that the cards didn't really turn out in her favor at the end, at least with WWE. But I do know she has a lot up her sleeve, which I'm really excited about, that I can't wait for her to share and all of that. So, I mean, I'm biased to her, obviously, but I really think that she should have been ranked higher in that top 50 women's list. And the fact she was number 12 was criminal. But yeah, she's always going to be my go-to.
Don't disagree. And of course, Wrestling Plug Inc. hopping in as well. Mickie James is so awesome. And a great shout from Ed. Hardcore Country is one of the best women's wrestling themes. I think he can take women's out of that. I think it's just one of the best wrestling themes out there. But we're going to have to touch on those the next time we've got you on, Ella, not only for stuff like that. You said you got big news, so we're going to have you on to plug the cool shit that you were up to then. But if people want to keep up with you in the interim, as I know they should, where can they find you?
How much time you got?
Take all the time you need. We've got 19 minutes until SmackDown.
Okay, I don't think
I've gone over my match times before.
So you can follow myself on Twitter at It's Ella J, or Instagram at Ella. I'm a northeastern New Yorker, almost Canadian. I'm 15 minutes from the Peace Bridge. And you can follow A Wrestling Gal on Twitter and Instagram at A Wrestling Gal or WrestlingGal.com. And you can listen anywhere you find your podcast, on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, etc. You can also find me on SE Scoops, doing Women's Wrestling Focus, which is a bi-weekly show focusing on the past, the present, and the future of women's wrestling, not only mainstream, but independent-wise, and all of that collective, all things women's wrestling. You can listen to Gawcast, which is Gaw TV's podcast with the lovely Mickie James, Lisa Marie Varian, and SoCal Val, which I am their editor for. Love working with them. And for right now, you can also listen to me on Bell to Bells, as I think I'm their newest member of their team officially, which we will be doing some more on-screen YouTube interviews with a lot of the female independent wrestlers and everybody involved in women's wrestling, not only wrestlers, but content creators and personalities. And we got some other fun stuff coming up. So yeah, I think that's
yeah. Hell yeah, friend. That is fantastic to hear. It also gives me an excellent opportunity to plug my next guest returning on Tuesday. We've got Kristen Ashley coming on the show, the founder, one of the founders, I should say, of Bell to Bells. Of course, someone else doing great things in professional wrestling and a great human being. So make sure to tune into that one on Tuesday. I've also got another couple guests up my sleeve for next week. Yes, 3 editions of The Mind Behind, because admittedly my girlfriend's out of town, so I've got a lot of time. I miss her, but I'm filling it with pro wrestling content, which is hopefully for the benefit of all of you guys, because I'm bringing you guys some great people. I like to think, plug Bell to Bells rules. I 100% agree with you as well. All of those projects rock. I agree with you as well, Ed, and I'll throw my plug in. Ella, it has rocked having you on the show today. Friends, if you are watching on Twitch, we are going to raid another individual that I loved having on another show, Spencer Love Interviews, of course, named after some Spencer Love guy. We're going to raid Mariah May, playing some Fall Guys right now. If you guys are watching, her. Right. So we're going to go and say hi to her. If you guys are tuned in on Facebook and YouTube, you guys are going to hear the music, but wherever you may be tuned in, thank you guys for supporting once again. Don't forget to throw us a follow at Love Wrestling CA on all of your social medias, whether it's where podcasts are played, videos are viewed, or thoughts are written. Feel free to join us. It is always appreciated. We'll see you guys soon. Talk to you on the next one.